Okay, welcome to an introduction on periodic functions. You should have gone through the textbook and looked at the definitions. I'll just want to talk about a couple of things before I go to the first example. Periodic functions, we have repetitive y values that are repetitive, okay? And as x values change by the same increment, okay? So those are a couple of key things from the definitions. The other thing sometimes mixes people up. What's the difference between a cycle and a period? The cycle is the portion of the graph that repeats, that repeating pattern. The period is the length of the cycle, the amount that x, or the horizontal distance, that one cycle or pattern takes. Trough is the min, peak is the max. The equation of the horizontal line is the equation of the axis. It's the average of the max or the min. I often call this the center line of the graph or the pattern, okay? And the amplitude is the distance from that center line to the max or the min. And the formula for the amplitude, we often use amp or even just A for amplitude. It is the max amount minus the min amount divided by 2. Okay, so one's the average and one's half the difference between the max and the min. All right, on to the first example. So what I would do first is look at vertical information first. So that means the center, or the equation of the axis, and the amplitude. So to do that, both of them rely on knowing where the max is. So I would look for a horizontal line that represents the max and a horizontal line that represents the minimum. And it's good practice, if it's not in your textbook, of course, to annotate right on the graph. So the max value here, this is 0, so 1, 2, 3. So each division is 1. Max is at 6. The min is at -3. So the equation of the axis, or the center line, happens at y equals max plus min divided by 2, or 3/2. All right, so let's draw a horizontal line for the equation of the axis. It happens at 3/2, right about there. It's a little too high, just a little bit lower, too low, one more try. There we go, right about there. So y is equal to 3/2. It's the center line, or the equation of the axis. Now to get the amplitude, we change it up. The amplitude, we take the max minus the min, divide by 2, and that's 9/2. And where does that appear on the graph? Well, it's actually pretty simple. 4.5 or 9/2. This distance is the amplitude, and this distance is the amplitude. Okay, that's the amplitude. The amplitude, 9/2, 4.5 up and 4.5 down from the equation of the axis, from the center line to the max point and the min point of the function. That's the vertical information. Horizontally, we're only going to be looking at the period, and you need to identify a repeated pattern and the start and end of the pattern. And I'm going to trace a few different ones here, and then I'll erase them. Some people like to start at the center line. Oops, I'm just going to use a brighter color and maybe slightly thinner. There we go. Here is one repeated pattern in this function. And you see how the pattern repeats. Oops, let me do that again. Do that again. I want to start at the center line. So here's one completed pattern right here. That's one cycle, and I could use that to determine the length. Some people really like to go peak to peak. So I start at the peak and I finish at the repeated peak. And if I find the length of that, I know the length of a period. I could also do a trough to a trough. I could start at this trough point, like that. Or I could start at an x-intercept and repeat until I get to the repeated point in the pattern. There we go. All those things would be fine as a cycle. Once you have a cycle, and I have a preference, I usually like to go peak to peak, but it doesn't have to be. Really doesn't. Some people like the y-axis, makes it easier to read. The whole point is you have to find the length of this. So you have to identify a full cycle first, and then you need to find the length of the cycle. It's a different color. Let's go blue. Right here to here. And when I look at that, this is 2.5, this is 2, this is 8, 8.5. Okay, so this looks like about 8.7. And the other one looks like about 2.3. I don't know if I agree with that. This is 6 point, yeah, 6.3. See, maybe this is 8.6. Estimating, right? Well, no, I think that was 8.7. I think this is more like 2.4. So my period is the difference between 8.7 and 2.4. And I'm getting a period of 6.3, which seems like an odd amount, but that's what I have. Sorry about that. I got distracted by something. I'm not quite done. Still need to do domain and range. Domain, there's no restrictions, so x is normal to the reals. The range is restricted by the max and the min. So y is between 6 inclusive and -3. There's the domain and the range. I was just looking at what the other teacher got for this. I think it's about 6.3 for the cycle. Maybe it's 6.25, but there we go.